Hi everyone, I'm Chris Stening, Senior Advisor at 8 Advisory, and I'm really pleased today to be here with Jeremy Chelot, CEO of Netomnia, YouFibre, and also with Nick Bredner, who's one of the partners here at 8 Advisory. So really pleased to be interviewing you, Jeremy, at this point. I think there's some exciting stuff going on, but I'll hand over to Nick to start the questions.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And yes, big news, Jeremy. Thank you for taking the time to kind of talk through the white paper with us. Obviously, before we get into that, we know a little bit from our side as we've been supporting you a bit on the British transaction, but I know others won't and they'll love to know what's the plan.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. So I think it's quite an important feature of that transaction, just the fact that both management teams are carrying on because you've got two great companies with fantastic growth trajectory just carrying on. And that was part of what we wanted to achieve. We think it's very positive news. As you saw, by merging those companies together, so now we believe that we are the second Altnet in the UK with more than 1.5 million premises ready for service and about 140,000 customers. But more importantly, those two companies together, while the growth trajectory is fantastic, what we are even more famous about is the fact that we are very capital efficient. So combined, our net debt position currently is about 300 million pounds. So having spent only 300 million pounds of debt while delivering 1.5 million premises and 140,000 customers put us in a very unique position in the UK. And this is why we believe that merger is creating a platform which will be on one hand fantastic from a wholesale standpoint, because those two networks, so the Netomnia network and the British network, will be presented as a single network with the ambition to deliver 3 million homes by the end of 2025, but will also give us basically a platform will enable us to hopefully consolidate more the UK market, because at the end of the day, this is what everybody is looking for, a new scale platform, the third network in the UK competing against BT and Virgin Media, and we think we've got the ability to deliver that with the growth that we've just talked about, but also the capital efficiency that we are known for.
That's very exciting, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. Why don't we get into the white paper? And obviously you've had the opportunity to read both versions of that paper now. What was it that struck you about the piece and what did you take from it?
The thing that struck me the most is BT is phenomenal at having basically take-up on their fiber network, and somehow the Altnets are lagging, not that good, but at least it came across as Altnet bad, BT good. I disagree strongly with that statement, and I'm going to explain to you why. First of all, just to be clear, BT is migrating customers. They are not actually acquiring most of those customers, they're actually migrating them. And if anything, if you look at the Openreach network, they've been losing lines. They've lost 500,000 lines last year, and I will expect to lose a lot more this year. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it looks fantastic, but I'm a bit biased. Obviously, I'm on the other camp, so the one fighting the war on the other side. What I will say, we should compare the Altnet take-up versus BT, Virgin Media, Sky, TalkTalk, and to some extent Vodafone, so whether we call them the big four or the big five. And from that standpoint, if you look at BT's take-up in the UK, so I think it's close to 9 million, I think, customers, something like that. Let's say we said that there are 28 million properties in the UK. So across three brands, BT plus Net and EE, it's about a 32% take-up. It's good, but this is not like it's fantastic. Or maybe it is fantastic. And in that case, 32% is actually a measure of being fantastic in terms of take-up. Now, if you do the same calculation and you take Virgin Media, it's currently about 5.8 million customers on the network, which is about 17 million premises ready for service. It's about 34% take-up. Again, it looks like when you look at the measure of success, on one hand, you've got a BT across three brands delivering about 32% take-up, got Virgin Media across one brand delivering 34% take-up. Then if you look at Sky, I think they are also roughly in the 5.6, 5.8 million, and you divide it by 28 million premises. Again, it gives you around 20% take-up, maybe a bit more, maybe 21, 22, depending on the number that you're using. So if you look at those numbers as a benchmark of a very good retail provider, having with a very strong brand, the ability to capture customer, has been doing that over several decades. And now you compare that against the Altnet. Let's start with usually the one that we call the number one in terms of ISP. And I think you had Dana in one of your conversation. It's got roughly a blended take-up about 30% on our network. Seems very comparable to me to BT and Virgin Media. So from that standpoint, she's doing fantastic. Then if you take Community Fiber or GigaClear, which are kind of the four horsemen that started with CityFibre, so those four companies. So if you look at Community Fiber and GigaClear, both of them have now a blended take-up in the 20% region, and therefore clearly indicating that their older cohort have to be above 30%. Therefore also showing that they have the ability to deliver as much take-up as BT and Virgin Media that are much more established as brand. And then after that, if you finish with CityFibre and Netomnia, YouFibre and Brisk, those two companies now have a blended take-up above 10%, despite a massive growth. If you look at the take-up percentage of Netomnia, for example, a year ago, we had a blended take-up in the region of 6%. Now our blended take-up is above 10%, despite having added more than 500,000 premises ready for service on top of that. Again, if you run the number, it means that we've got a lot of older cohort that are in the 20 and the 30%. Actually, our oldest cohort, which is our 2020 vintage, is now at 34%. And all our 2021 vintage, they are now above 22%. So clearly, and if you do the same with CityFibre, we know for a fact that Milton Keynes and some of their oldest cohort are also in the 30% region. So I will argue that if you believe that BT is the gold standard in terms of take-up, and that's something which is fantastic, whether you look at them doing migrations or just their customer base, I will argue that the Altnet that represent currently 80% of the UK footprint, i.e. those five Altnet, CityFibre, Community Fiber, HyperOptic, GigaClear, and Netomnia, YouFibre, and Brisk together, are also demonstrating that they are getting into the 30% if they are not already there. Therefore, from that standpoint, the take-up is fantastic. And even if you were to extend that list to more players, you could look at Zoom, you could look at Tube, you could look at all those companies. You look at their take-up or true speed, many of those companies have blended take-up above 20%, and they've got very good numbers. So I will argue that actually Altnet are fantastic at delivering take-up if you compare it against our competition. And our competition is BT, Virgin Media, Sky, TalkTalk, and Vodafone. That's the part that struck out for me from your report. It sounds like you think that we are bad compared to what? Compared to them, I think we are doing fantastic.
We don't think you're bad, Jeremy. Quite the opposite, and a very convincing answer. Thank you for that. A kind of secondary question to that, then, I guess, is where's the limit?
That is a very good question. That I don't know. The very good answer for the first one. Where is the limit? The limit, I think, will be a function of the average revenue per user that the Altnet wants to achieve and the ability to bundle services, and therefore for the main provider to actually retain their customer base or bleed actually as slow as possible. Because, for example, you will have lots of people who will never buy from an Altnet if we don't have TV, if we don't have mobile, if we don't have something. You will have also a lot of people who have been BT customer for 2 decades and will never buy ever from any other company than BT. Don't think that's a problem with Virgin Media. I think Virgin Media customer loves churning and would like to thank Virgin Media again for that. So I think the limit will be when the ARPUs are actually starting to meet kind of in the middle. What is interesting is we can see that the BT ARPU keeps increasing year on year, and that's, I think, a very impressive thing, whereas the Virgin Media ARPU keeps decreasing. And therefore, there is a clear trend between ARPUs of the Altnet that are just increasing and the ARPU of the main providers that are, if you ignore BT, that are flatlining or decreasing, and therefore at some point will merge closer, I think, to the middle. And then it will start becoming more a fight about customer service, the quality of your network, the speed that you offer, and so on. Whereas currently Altnet tends to take that fight. Yes, we've got great network, got great customer service. You can look at our Trustpilot score, which is fantastic. But we win a lot of the fight also on price. It's well known to know that we sell our services that's significantly cheaper than the incumbents, and we keep those people for the customer service. So the limit is hard to tell. So our business plan has always been with taking a third of the market. So whatever we always told the banks or told our equity sponsor was okay. We expect to get into the 33% mark. And the reason for that, we always thought, okay, it looks like it's going to be a fight as a 3-player market with BT, Virgin Media, and us. So at the very least, we should take a third. So let's aim for that. But obviously, you should also layer wholesale on top of that. So I think there is still a big fight ongoing to attract Vodafone, TalkTalk, and Sky, and that can increase significantly your take-up if you've got a very strong anchor tenant on one side, and on top of that, you can add a wholesale. I can see a path to getting to 40% or more when you start combining the two. That's, I think, something which is very interesting with the UK market, because I don't believe that the UK market has a true wholesale platform. Because if you look at Openreach, which is the #1 wholesale platform, actually, let me rephrase. There is a true wholesale platform in the UK, and it's CityFibre. But even then, with CityFibre, pricing is not transparent. So for example, some ISPs get one price, some other ISP get another price. For me, this is not the definition of a true wholesale platform. So a wholesale platform is supposed to be open, transparent. Everybody gets the same pricing, everybody gets the same service, and the fight basically ends up being at the marketing, sales, and customer service. But you can't really do that on the CityFibre network because everybody gets a different price. Then on the other side, you've got the Openreach network, which is completely transparent in terms of pricing. But there is the big elephant in the room, their anchor tenant called BT plus Net and EE. That really, if that anchor tenant is not there, that platform basically will be a lot weaker. And then you have basically this Virgin Media O2 and nexfibre, which trying to do a NetCo and ServCo split, and also having nexfibre, which is a wholesale only. But let's be clear, the business model only works because they've got a very strong anchor tenant called Virgin Media. So I think the wholesale market in the UK is still a bit broken as far as I'm concerned, but maybe it's not. And that's why I believe the recipe in the UK for wholesale to work is by having a strong anchor tenant, which is why for us, we started first by building a very strong anchor tenant with YouFibre and now also Brisk ISP, and expecting also to have transparent pricing on our platform to then attract hopefully Vodafone, TalkTalk, Sky, I don't know, maybe BT and Virgin Media. No, I'm joking. They will never use it. But the point is we are trying to do that. So what is the limit? I think when you have a strong anchor tenant that you control and you add wholesale on top of that, you should definitely get into the 40% plus. After that, the question is how far do you get to? It really depends on where the average revenue per user at the retail level and at the wholesale level operates. And as they tighten basically between the competitors, then I think the market share basically will stabilize. But if they don't tighten, then I think we'll just carry on grabbing as many customers as we are currently. Just to put it in context, so YouFibre and Brisk ISP just at the end of May added more than 12,000 customers in a single month. This is significantly more than most of the large retailers that you can see and better than most Altnet. And that tells you basically what we are taking every month. And June is looking like being even a higher number than that.
Excellent. So you talked a bit about the changes that you foresee in the wholesale market and that are needed. Is there anything else that you think needs to change to really sort of supercharge take-up?
I think obviously, as you know, I'm a director at TOTCO, so I think one touch switch is going to be a significant help to increase take-up because it's still relatively difficult to leave one of the incumbents. I'm sure you've read the news several weeks or months ago with people staying in a queue for 45 or an hour to try to speak to someone with Virgin Media to try to leave. And as soon as one touch switch gets what I want, the gaining provider can just issue basically a cease and the service is gone. So obviously, there are a bit more steps and so on. You need consent, you need everything, but you no longer need to actually talk to a new operator. And I think it's going to be a very interesting change. Obviously, there are ways around that. So I'm not going to share all the secret. There are ways to actually preempt and try to use that for your own advantage. But I think it's going to be a big change when it's going to be easier for people to switch. Otherwise, I think the market conditions are currently in a very good place. I don't think there is a lot more to change. If anything, I recommend usually for not too many changes and certainty, because I think sometimes even when you see campaigns, for example, to fight mid-contract price rises and all those things, which I believe are terrible. I think if you sign a contract, the fact that the price in the middle of your contract can change and you don't even know by how much is completely insane to me. This is not how I operate. Is if you sign something, they tell you it's going to be X, you're expecting it to be X, but somehow then the X become X plus something, which makes no sense. I think trying to change basically the rules of the game by preventing this type of method is sometimes actually, as far as I'm concerned, counterproductive, because I think it's a huge USP for the Altnet, the ability to say, you can trust us because we are not going to do that. We provide fair and transparent pricing. We are not going to do that. And it becomes actually a marketing tool where as soon as basically you get the regulator or you get somebody involved to actually stop this type of behavior that I consider are very bad, the only thing that you do is you are making them fairer in terms of their behavior. And therefore, it removes actually some marketing tools on our side because you force them to behave rather than not. So for me, I advocate for stability and please don't change too much. For example, some people will say, oh, but we did a lot more about fiber versus copper and why it's not fiber. I've never been an advocate for that. So I believe what I sell is not fiber. I'm not selling fiber. What I'm actually selling is a service that has a speed, a price, and a quality of service. And if I were to sell just on the basis of fiber, when Openreach reaches 25 million and Virgin Media and nexfibre, then what do I have to sell? Because they have fiber too. So then I'm left, it's like, okay, you've removed everything. So I never believed that was a fight worth fighting, but you should be fighting it on your side as a retailer. I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you exactly what I've got. And I think this is a much better way to do marketing and sales rather than trying to stop through the ASA or through the regulators to try to have a level playing field on how people talk basically to consumer. I think this is the job of the Altnet, to spend their time educating the customer and showing that if we didn't exist, fiber will not even be rolled out in the UK. So BT most likely will still be sitting basically rolling out G-Fast and try to work out when they will do fiber, and Virgin Media will still be doing DOCSIS. And this is what I'm saying is I think this is the job of the Altnet to actually shape the market and shape actually how customers sees us, that they choose to take our service. So I'm more advocate for the least changes possible, but I think the OTS and the water switch process will be a quite significant game changer, which hopefully will come early September, because we've been waiting for it for a long time. And this is why I'm part of Totco, to try to make sure that it gets launched.
Excellent. So the one thing you did say, Jeremy, is that YouFibre and Brisk are having really good months and you're getting some really strong take-up. So what is the sort of secret to the success in that consumer ISP space?
I think we genuinely care about the people who we roll out to. That's maybe the first thing. I mean, if you look on Twitter, actually I reply to a lot of customers. I still have customers of mine that are on WhatsApp with me and I talk to them. I think both teams genuinely care about the people who use the service. Those two teams also have been very focused on the quality of what we provide. I mean, I was one of the first doing XGS PON when everybody thought that XGS was too expensive, that was not worth time. For me, I started properly doing it in 2018 at Community Fibre. Why? Because I thought that, okay, if I can provide a much higher speed and therefore a better service, why not? Yes, it's a bit more expensive to do it, especially with the equipment that you've got in the home, but why not? Last year, I was, I think, maybe the first one in the UK or one of the first one launching an 8,000 meg service. When everybody thought, okay, but everybody needs only 100 meg, why are you selling that? And that's true, by the way. Most people don't need much more than 50 or 100 meg. Obviously, depending on what you're doing, if you're a gamer and you need to download a game, yes, that makes a big difference to have 8,000 meg connections. So you're not launching the thing and going to sleep, you're actually launching it and 5 minutes later, you're actually playing with it. There are some benefits, but I think both teams have been innovators. Both teams genuinely care. And when I say genuinely care, because every team will say that they care, as I say, it's down to even the management team being very close to all the customers, because at the end of the day, that's our purpose. And that's one of the things potentially in some of your report, which is quite interesting, is there is, I believe, and I believe it's a myth, but maybe not, is that somehow the Altnet first, they were only focusing on building. And then one day they woke up and they realized, I need to put customers on the network. Let me do it now. I don't believe it has ever been like that. At least if you talk to Community Fibre that I used to run right from when there were only 342 premises pass, or it was tiny, or hyper-optic or gigaclear, those networks started with customer in mind first. This is why usually when you look at the cohorts, which are the oldest cohort, this is where you see the strongest take-up. Actually, everybody was focused on that. There was never, I think, that shift that somehow the market has considered that has happened. So the CEO woke up one day and said, oh, now I need customer, I need revenue. Nobody had told me that. now I need to do it. I don't think it ever happened. It was always actually the first thing that we had in mind. I would argue that what makes us so successful with Brisk and YouFibre is we are not losing that focus. We actually look after our customer like when we had only a handful of them. So I've not changed basically my focus on that. And I think this is the single most important thing that you can do is as you grow, never stop caring. That's what we do best, I think.
That's good advice for business, full stop, I think. So always care about your customers. I do suddenly feel very old because I remember launching the 8 meg service on UK Online. And you're now talking about an 8,000 megabit service. So shows you how the world has changed, doesn't it?
That's correct.
Jeremy, thank you very much for that. Or anything else you wanted to say, quite?
I think that merger with Brisk is phenomenal for the Altnet because I do believe that the UK market is really, really fragmented. Right? And that is technically true. There are lots of Altnets, but in reality, when you look at the size of the footprint or the amount of customer, it's actually very concentrated on a handful of those players, or potentially you could have a list of about 10. And I think it's down to that list of players to actually shape the market in a way that we become that third player, that we become that new basically fiber company that can forever challenge BT and challenge Virgin Media. And this is why I think that consolidation is quite meaningful, because this is not a consolidation like what we've seen with for example, or a consolidation like what we've seen with lead fiber. This is a consolidation of companies that are hungry, companies that are growing very fast, companies that have a lot of capitals, and therefore that can really create a new platform in the UK that is fantastic for wholesale, fantastic for consolidation. It can really rival the two main incumbents. And I think people will look back to that event and realize how important that event was in the Altnet history. And if one day somebody writes a book, maybe me, I don't know, I think it will be a very, very important moment. And I think people need to remember it.
You heard it here first. So Jeremy, thank you ever so much for that. Really appreciate it. I think there's going to be some very exciting stuff to be watched between Brisk and Netomnia and YouFibre in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for having me. And obviously, thank you very much for supporting us now with the transaction with Brisk and in the future. Thank you again.
Pleasure.